Hello everyone, I want to start this lecture with a question. Why do you think we're beginning this class by talking about reading and writing? You might be thinking, aren't we here to learn about ethics? And that's true. Or you might be thinking, we're at a university, I already know how to read and write. And to a certain extent that too is true, but here's the thing. If you can't read carefully and write clearly, you won't be able to do ethics well. Let me ask you another question. Have you ever had an idea in your head that felt really clear until you tried to explain it to someone else? Yeah, me too. It's really common, and here's why. Most of our ideas start out really vague. We think we know what we believe, but until we're forced to explain it in words, we haven't actually tested it. Even great philosophers like St. Augustine had this problem. He said, "What then is time? If no one asks me, I know. If I wish to explain it to one who asks, I do not know." When you try to explain an idea, that's when you start seeing the gaps. Maybe your explanation doesn't quite make sense. Maybe you realize that two parts don't fit together. Maybe you don't actually know why you believe what you believe. And this is why articulation matters. Writing forces you to turn fuzzy ideas into clear ones. It makes you define what you mean. It makes you connect your reasons, and it makes you see where things don't add up. Making sure that all the parts add up, and that all the different parts actually work together is a key feature of philosophy. Rational ideas are structured so that they make sense and work together. If ideas don't work together, or if they don't add up, then we have a system that is not rational. Irrational ideas and systems don't work. I want you to picture this. Imagine that your idea is a star high in the sky. If you want someone else to reach it, you have to build a staircase leading up to it. Every step needs to be solid. If you skip steps or leave holes, no one can follow you. Without clear articulation, no one else can understand what it is that you're trying to say, and sometimes even you can't get to your own idea because you haven't built the path yet. Now let's talk about reading carefully. Here is the First Amendment. It is only one sentence. And I want to ask you, what rights does the First Amendment give you? A lot of people say it gives us freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, and so on. But here's the thing. The First Amendment doesn't give you any of those rights. Let's read it carefully. The Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, and so on. It doesn't say Congress grants you the right. It says Congress shall make no law, taking away rights that you already have. So it's not giving you rights, it's protecting the rights you already possess from the government. That's a big difference. If we misread it, we misunderstand what rights are and where they come from. In the case of the Constitution, the rights that you have are considered natural rights. Those would be rights that every human being has because they are human. No person or government grants you those rights, they are natural. That means that the purpose of the First Amendment is to protect your rights from the state. It prohibits the state from messing with your rights. Now here's another example. What do you think the idea of separation of church and state actually means? A lot of people think that it means that religious people aren't allowed to bring their beliefs into government discussions. But actually, the phrase was meant to protect religion from government interference, which is what had happened in Europe for 150 years and why writers like John Locke tried to push the ideas of toleration. This idea wasn't meant to keep religious people silent. It was meant to make sure that government couldn't control religion. If we flip the meaning, we end up using the phrase to exclude the very people that it was supposed to protect. Notice also that if religious ideas were prohibited from contributing to the government, then we would deny religious population the right to actually petition the government for redress of grievances, because we would have to dismiss their ideas. It would also mean that no representation of their values, concerns, and ideas could be allowed, so no electing senators, representatives, the president, and so on, because they would be doing it from a religious set of values. So reading the First Amendment as prevention of religious ideas and values in government would actually be the government interfering with religious and other natural rights. This shows us how reading carefully changes the entire conversation. Now, let's move on. You may have noticed that the author of our first article is Dr. Jordan Peterson. Yes, that same Dr. Jordan Peterson who has said things that some people found extremely offensive. And you might be wondering why we're reading something by him. Well, let's try to look at it this way. If someone you dislike says something, does that automatically make their idea wrong? Well, no. And the reverse is also true. If someone you admire says something, it doesn't automatically make the idea right. In philosophy and ethics, we focus on ideas, not people. A good idea stays good even if a bad person says it. And a bad idea stays bad even if a good person says it. We have to learn to separate the speaker from the idea. That way we can evaluate the argument on its own merits. This is especially true in philosophy because everyone has had some funky ideas. Socrates and Plato supported pedophilia, Aristotle supported natural slavery, and that's just the start of Western philosophy. You can't find anyone whose every single idea is supported by everyone, and that's why we don't care about the person, but only their ideas. In the case of Dr. Jordan Peterson, this article is easily the most coherent and succinct explanation of how and why articulation of your ideas is important. Now, if we think about this from a math perspective, you should all be familiar with the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared is c squared. Now, what kind of a person was Pythagoras? Did he have terrible ideas? Did he mistreat people and so on? And if he did, is his formula any less true? Should we forget how to solve tangents of right angles because he had bad ideas? You can see that clearly doesn't go anywhere. Now let's talk about another important distinction for ethics: moral scale versus the functional scale. Here's a question. Do you think we're all equal? The answer is, it depends on what kind of equality we're talking about. On a moral scale, we are all equal. That is, we all have the same human dignity. We all have the same basic rights. No one's life is worth more than anyone else's in a moral sense. That's one way we can talk about ethical and moral issues. But on a functional scale, we are most definitely not equal. People have different skills, talents, strengths, and weaknesses. Some people are faster, some are better at math, some are stronger. Functionally, we are different. That's another and very different way that we can talk about ethics and morality. And here's why this matters. We need to be clear whether we're having a moral conversation or a functional one, because they're not at all the same. If we mix them up, we get confused. For example, it is morally wrong to deny someone a job because of their race. But it is functionally okay to deny someone a job if they don't have the necessary skills. One is about fairness and rights, and the other one is about the ability to do the work. And if we don't understand which scale we're using, we will end up arguing right past each other. We will confuse moral fairness with practical requirements. Ethics requires us to keep those conversations separate so that we can solve problems clearly. So, why are we starting with all of this? Because before we can tackle ethical issues in business or life, we need the right tools. How do we read or listen carefully? How do we write or speak carefully? How to articulate our ideas? How to evaluate arguments? How to separate the speaker from their idea? And how to know when we're talking morally versus when we're talking functionally. These are all the skills that will carry you through this course and far beyond. So keep asking questions, keep testing your ideas, keep building those stairs to the stars, and remember, we're not here to tell you what to think. We're here to help you learn how to think clearly, carefully, and ethically. With that, let's get started.